is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joire.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joire, and today is Wednesday, March 28th, 2018. My guest is Jon Rettinger of TechnoBuffalo. Hey, Jon, how are you?
I am good, and I am happy to be here. I've been a big fan, admirer of yours for going back way longer than I'm going to say publicly.
Haha, awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on. This is a really exciting show, really, because the P20 just got launched by Huawei, and we've been waiting for this one for a while. I mean, I think, it looks very exciting, and we'll get into that. But I think, Samsung did their thing, and, it's iterative, and it's good, but we haven't really had anything super innovative in a while. And while they're in some areas, I think Huawei is kind of evolutionary with their product here. I think in some other areas, they're really, really pushing the envelope. And so that's got me excited. You're the guy that's going to talk about the P20 with me. Like, this is exciting.
Yeah, so it looks like phones are going the same way as Razors did a few years ago, just adding more and more blades on, and now we're just adding more and more cameras. I mean, so the P20 Pro, it's got 3 cameras, and which is insane. The monochrome camera alone is 20 megapixels. The RGB is freaking 40. And then there's an 8 megapixel telephoto lens. Yep. That's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's not that crazy in the sense that, Nokia did it first, but, and we'll talk about that. But I think it's pretty impressive. I think I was not expecting that. I really was expecting them to take what they had in the Mate 10, and enhance it. So I was expecting a third lens for zoom, which is what they did. Mm-hmm. But I was also expecting the main 2 sensors to remain the same. 20 megapixel, one f/1.6, which is the monochrome sensor. Yep. And I was expecting a 12 megapixel or 16 megapixel f/1.6 again, basically like the Mate 10, standard RGB sensor, a good quality RGB sensor. But they did that for the P20 regular, but then they kind of really put a lot of twist in it by adding this, replacing that kind of sensor where what seems to be, from the discussions I've had with crazy phone photography fans, a custom in-house made sensor that's 40 megapixels, and they're doing some really tricky things with that. It's 1 micron pixels and 1 over 1.7 inch, which is a really large sensor. So they must be doing some really interesting things with the optics, because to get a phone that's 7.7 millimeters, whatever that P20 Pro is, in thickness, with a sensor that big and very little lens protrusion, tells me that Leica's done some magic using spherical elements in the optics to make that happen.
Yeah, very true. In-house sensor is interesting. I'm sure your audience is pretty educated.
I mean, I'm not sure. We're not sure, right? Sensors. It's just speculation. But at this point, nothing on the spec sheet. Nobody makes that sensor from what we can see. So unless they worked with Sony or LG or Samsung, I mean, those are the image sensor makers, right? I mean.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make. Is most sensors are Sony sensors. I mean, for the most part, and Sony has a 40 megapixel sensor, but it's not out yet. And I be led to believe that Huawei would probably not be the first to get that sensor.
So we're not sure what they're doing.
Also, can we talk about the color too for a minute? The color on the Pros are gorgeous.
Yeah. I just want to clarify one thing really quick for the listeners is the P20 only has dual camera, right? It doesn't add the zoom lens, and it has a relatively standard setup in terms of sensors. And then the P20 Pro is the one with the really kind of really innovating in terms of imaging with this weird new sensor. And there's way more to that. There's a lot of it is computational photography I want to talk about. You guys can hear that my voice is getting better. This is the 4th podcast. My voice is getting better. I've been sick, not very sick, but my voice really took a toll, and it's still kind of meh. But anyway, colors. You know what? I think phones need more color.
Completely agree.
And I'm kind of glad to see that Huawei with a P20, I think it's only the Pro, right, that has that twilight color, which is like gorgeous. A rainbow almost, but it goes from like a blue green to a like purple red?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks incredible.
Check out the photos on TechnoBuffalo. There's some good examples there.
Yeah, we have some good shots. What's interesting, I think, to me about this phone, like you said, a lot of manufacturers are going sort of iterative design. This is something that's relatively new in the mass market space. Obviously, it has been done before, but to this level is fascinating, especially if you look at the Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL being held to this crazy high standard for cameras. I mean, the DxO score, I know, has sort of been the default way to evaluate cameras now. But that camera, I think, subjectively and objectively is incredible. And now you're looking at a setup here, at least on paper, beats that already incredible setup. It just goes to show how fast things change.
I'm always a little, careful with this because there's so much hype, right? And but I played with the phones. I got briefed in San Francisco last week. You saw my hands-on video. If you haven't looked in the show notes, it'll be there. And I am impressed with the camera. And I'm impressed in the camera to the point where I'm willing to say that maybe, and this is a strong maybe, not a maybe, but I think we might be getting to the point where this could be as good as a Pixel 2 in some instances, and potentially better in others. And I don't think there's any other phone that can do that right now. So that has got me super stoked.
I agree. And the fact that something could be better than that, I think Google's machine learning on the back end is really what gives the Pixel 2 its potential edge.
Exactly. And nobody has that level of machine learning in the sense that they don't have the data set. A lot of people don't understand that AI, machine learning, the algorithms are well known. There are some people who have better implementation of these algorithms, maybe some tweaks on these algorithms to make them slightly better, but that doesn't really matter so much. It's really what you feed into the machine learning box, into the AI box that gives you the output that matters. And what you feed into it is the more variety and the more quality of data you feed into it, and the more samples of data you feed into it, the more your results will be accurate. And so that's exactly the problem right now is Huawei has all this AI, LG in the V30S Plus or NS Think Q, that's a handful, right? Yeah. But that thing also has AI, and Samsung has AI on their phone, on their camera too. But none of these can match what Google can do. Even Apple can't get there because they just don't have the data sets.
Yeah, that's a really strong point to make, and why you're seeing these incredible cameras and the incredible end product come out of Google. And you're right, Apple doesn't even hold a candle when it comes to Google in the camera department. Their portrait effect, their background blurring, all you have to do is hold up your hand and see the web effect that's going to take place in between your fingers, and try the same thing with the Pixel 2 or the 2 XL, and you'll really see the difference on what the machine learning makes.
So, the verdict will be when we get our review units. I'm supposed to get one soon, so Same. I'm very excited because this is like, oh my God, I want this so bad. So going back to why we're excited. Okay, so you've probably read this. Let's go over the specs. Let's get the P20 out of the way first because it's cool. So, okay, so the P20, I'm not mostly going to talk about the camera, but in terms of its general layout, the P20 is 5.8 inch. 18 by 9 phone with an IPS LCD panel. And it has a 3400 milliamp hour battery, 4 gigs of RAM, Kirin 970, which is Huawei's in-house top-of-the-line chip. It competes easily with Snapdragon 835, 845. And it is got a dual camera system in the back. It's got 24 megapixel, 0.9 micron, f/2.0 front-facing camera, and it's not water resistant. It's splash resistant, but not really. You can't drop it in the toilet. That's always my test. And so, not that I actually test the phones like that, but and so that's the lay of the land on. I'm trying to remember if I forgot anything. And no headphone jack on either of these. So that's the P20 in terms of specs. Now the camera, if you look on paper, looks very similar to the Mate 10, Mate 10 Pro camera, but it has one big difference. The Mate cameras have f/1.6 on both lenses. The P20 has f/1.8 on the color and 1.6 on the mono. And here's the thing that's going to make you scream. And at first, when they briefed me, I was like, are you freaking kidding me? That was the lack of OIS. And I want to go back to that later. That's why I'm bringing it up now. And now, why don't you go quickly over the specs of the P20 Pro on how it improves over the P20?
Oh yeah, I'm like drooling just looking at the Huawei spec sheet here. So first, the obvious one, that twilight color is hot. It's also available in black or midnight blue, and there's a kind of a cool pink gold color. Also to remember, this is a phone that is 7.8 millimeters thin, which is
thin.
Crazy thin. So it's a bigger screen, 6.1 inches. Of course, the tech is OLED. 408 PPI. It's got the same Kirin 970 CPU, which you said really does.
RAM.
RAM is also a big deal here as well. But the 6, Kirin, right? They got the 6 gigs, yeah.
So
the Kirin 970 does really compare very well and benchmark well and real world well to the 845 even. So you get an extra 2 gigs of RAM, 6 gigs, 128 gigabytes on the ROM side. Although we should tease a little bit, there's a version of this phone that also comes with 512.
Let's not go there yet. But you're right. Yeah, absolutely.
But something to talk about. The RGB camera, the cameras are where the big story takes place. So it's a 40 megapixel RGB sensor, f1.8 aperture, and then it adds the monochrome sensor, which is 20 megapixels, f1.6. The telephoto is 8 megapixel. It's going to support also laser autofocus, which is a pretty decent thing. And then if that's not enough, the front-facing camera has a 24 megapixel sensor and f2.0. Yeah. So you can really blow up those selfies to be like giant wall pictures.
So a few notes on the zoom lens. The telelens has a f/2.4, which is pretty standard for telelens.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then it has for the f-stop, and it has it has OIS, which is really interesting. So, keep that in mind, because we're going to go back to this lack of OIS on the main sensors and OIS on the zoom thing in a second. And then what else is there? The front-facing cameras are the same, as I said, 24, as John said, 24 megapixel, 0.9 micron pixels with f/2.0. And there was one more difference. I can't remember. Oh, the battery's 4,000 instead of 3,400. Yeah. And then, there's an infrared transmitter on the Pro, which I didn't see on the 20. So I assume it's not on the 20.
Yeah, I didn't realize it even had an IR blaster on it.
Yeah, it does. It's at the top, like where you'd expect a headphone jack to be on the top edge.
People are fanatical about that.
Final difference between the P20 and P20 Pro is it's IP67. So it's actually, you can drop it in the toilet. It'll be fine. So that's a big, another huge difference you forgot. I think you mentioned it, but we didn't elaborate. And I think it's important to elaborate, is that, as I said, the 20 has a 5.8 inch IPS panel, but the 6.1 inch on the P20 Pro is OLED.
That is a big one.
And they're 1080p, so they're not like Quad HD, and they're 18:9, so they're 1080p by some 18 times 2 times that. So I don't know what, I would have to do the math real quick. It's really easy. But the thing that's interesting too is that they both have a notch, like the iPhone.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, oh man, copycat notch, blah blah blah. And at first I was also like, man, a notch, and then the bottom of the screen has a little bezel with a fingerprint reader in it. It's not as small a bezel as what's on the Galaxy, but it's not as big a bezel as what used to be, say, on the P10 last year. So it's kind of like, the size of the bezel is similar to the Mate 10 Non-Pro, which also has a fingerprint reader at the bottom. So, on the front. So that's a bit weird, because, the whole point of going edgeless display and having a notch in your display is that you're going to try like the Mi Mix 2S, which we're going to talk about later, you're going to try to minimize bezels all the way around. But somehow Huawei made a phone that kind of is anachronistic, because if you look at the top half, it looks super modern, like the iPhone 10 with the notch. And then you look at the bottom half, and if you didn't know what it was, you'd be like, oh, look, this looks like a Galaxy S7 from 2 years ago. Right?
Yeah, I agree. You brought up a point about the fingerprint
because
reader.
of the fingerprint reader. It's like, who puts a fingerprint reader in the front of a phone in 2018?
Where do you stand on ideal fingerprint reader placement?
It's in the back. That's everybody knows the back is where it's at. Nobody that touches their phone when they're sitting on a flat surface and unlocks it. Like, you always pick it up. And then if it's much more convenient to have it on the back, simply because when it's in your pocket, by the time you pull it out of your pocket, your index fingers touch that fingerprint reader on the back, because you can feel it by touch, and you instantly have the phone unlocked in front of you. Kind of like Face ID. It's instantaneous. Whereas
I agree.
With the front one, you have to pull out the phone from your pocket and fumble with it on the edge at the bottom, which means your phone is out of balance. Tap in the right way, and then if you haven't dropped your phone by then, maybe it's unlocked. It's BS. I mean, honestly, fingerprint readers in the front are passé. I mean, that to me looks like an old phone. The moment you see a fingerprint reader and home button on a phone today, it means you do not have the latest phone. Go away.
Miriam's looking at you, iPhone 8 owners and iPhone 8 Plus owners.
Oh my God, they have no idea what they're missing.
They
have no idea what they're missing, in my opinion.
I actually agree with you. That's another topic we can broach, but I absolutely completely agree with you. The iPhone 10 stands very clearly alone in Apple's portfolio.
And I think it's the future, and whether people like it or not, they'd better get used to it. Because honestly, I mean, I'm not an Apple fangirl, but I bought an iPhone 10 because I think it's the most innovative iPhone since the original. A, and B, once you get used to the gestures, it's phenomenal. It's so much, it's miles ahead in terms of user experience than any iPhone before it.
I've been actually very surprised how reliable Face ID has been. That's been shocking.
Yeah, I mean, wow. And as an aside, and I want to bring this up yet again, because this is like every Android manufacturer failing miserably at being competitive, which is unusual, because usually the Android manufacturers are way more competitive than Apple in terms of hardware. And they're failing yet again here with the Mate 20, because there's no Face ID equivalent. There is Face Unlock, like a lot of phones have it now. The View 10 from Honor, which is also a Huawei branded phone. Then there is the OnePlus 5 and 5T, that have very good secondary unlock using Face, right? Like not primary, in the sense, what I mean by that is that they're not able to be used. First of all, they're not secure enough to be your main unlock. Secondly, they're not able to do payments. They're not approved for Google Pay. And they're not approved for mission critical stuff like your banking and whatever. So here is what I want to see, and I think we'll see it on the Pixel 3. I think this is the only one who can pull this off, because it has to be at the system level, right? It has to be deep into Android that this is done. We're going to see it with Android P on the Pixel 3, I think. And then we'll be finally at parity with what the iOS and Apple universe is bringing to the table. Because to me, that is clearly the future. I'm not saying that I think that phones should not have a fingerprint reader. I think it's nice to have the option. And this is what Android is all about: options, choices. I support a phone that has both a fingerprint reader, and it has to be in the back, and Face ID done through 3D geometry depth recognition of your face, like Apple does. They're the only ones who do this. Samsung with their hybrid thing doesn't even come close. It can't be used securely for payments because Retina doesn't really work very well. It's never worked for me. So I think that when I use my Galaxy S9 Plus right now, and I do with the face recognition, like the hybrid face, it just uses my face only. Like, it can never see my irises and work with them, because I know from the past it never worked. So I can probably put a photo of me in front of that phone and it'll work, Interesting.
So a few points. So Samsung's implementation is probably the closest that we have right now to Apple. They're hybrid.
Yeah, and it works in the dark, which is nice.
Yeah. Retinas can be used, I believe, though, for payment authentication, at least on Samsung side with Samsung Pay.
Samsung Pay, yeah.
Yeah, can be
used. Who
used.
uses that?
But I love Samsung Pay. I'm going to disagree with you, though, on the Pixel 3 catching up to Face ID.
You don't think we're going to see it there?
I think we're still a generation away.
Really?
from seeing it, which is a big time bummer. You throw.
The only reason I'm saying that is because Google had Tango, right?
Yep.
So the sensors used in Tango are very similar. They can. I mean, we're like a few years now. We're 2 years beyond the latest Tango. Like in terms of design, the last Tango phone was the Asus Zenfone AR, and in terms of its engineering, that phone is about 2 years behind now, right? It's a Snapdragon 821 class phone. So I'm saying that it's not unreasonable to say that Google could have worked with someone like HTC particularly, who does a lot of VR, right, with Vive, to create a sensor for the next generation Pixel 3 that miniaturizes what was in the back of Tango phones and puts it in the front in a notch or not a notch.
So reasonable to assume, and I think with seeing Android P specifically calling out essentially notches, I think it's a safe bet that the Pixel 3 will have it. But I think the Pixel 3 is going to focus on the hardware and the builds. I think that's where we're going to see it start to catch up to Apple. I think, at least for me, the knock on the Pixel 2 is that it's an ugly phone. It's an incredible phone, the incredible user experience, but it's kind of ugly compared to the competition.
I agree, but honestly, that's the problem with HTC. Okay, here's the thing. There are a lot of things that will change for the Pixel 3. First of all, HTC no longer exists, really, pretty much. Yep. I mean, they're going to make one more smart flagship. I've been saying this, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the U12 or whatever is going to be the last flagship HTC phone we're going to see.
I agree.
So right now, the problem with HTC, until they were a part of Google, like they're not completely a part of Google, but a huge chunk of them is a part of Google. Until then, they had to compete, right? Like, so HTC would keep the beautiful things for themselves and give the less beautiful things to Google. And then, honestly, this has been the problem with LG all along, is every time LG's made a Nexus or a Pixel phone, well, the only time they made a Pixel was the Pixel 2 XL, it's cheap, right? I mean,
yes.
The Nexus 5 is my favorite Nexus, and it's a plasticky piece of S, right? I mean, reality is it's not a really good design and not a really, I mean, it's industrial design I like, but I think in terms of build quality and materials, it lacks a lot, right? I mean, it was really cheap, but I feel like if I put the V30 next to the Pixel 2 XL, same display, but the V30 feels so much more premium, right? Because, I mean, and this is what's vexing me about the Pixels, is that these are phones that cost a lot of money, yet build quality and materials and design are really meh, right? So I do hope that what you say is right, but I really do feel that Google's never been that strong at design, build quality, and materials. And they still don't sell enough phones to be really, really relevant. So they are making phones for those of us who really, like, I've been always using a Nexus and Pixel as my main daily driver every year, simply because I want the updates and I want the purest Google experience. And I'm willing to sacrifice. Some years I've sacrificed on camera. Some years I've sacrificed on design build quality. And this year I'm sacrificing a headphone jack because of that, right?
Yeah,
so that's kind of how I see it. I don't think it's going to change. So I think it's possible that they're going to introduce, but you're right. It might be Pixel 4. Who knows?
I'm hopeful. Google has ventured into high end of the build material, though, with like the Pixel Book. I mean, obviously, that's a computer for very few people. But they have ventured into that sort of high end industrial design that I'm hoping is going to filter down to the phones. On a little bit of a tangent, though, I do think at I/O, in addition to whenever they announce the Pixel, whether it's at I/O, whether they wait a few months like they have in the past, I do think we're going to see a Pixel Watch this year, and I'm just throwing that out there. I think the climate is ripe for the former Android Wear, for now Wear OS to. I
hope so. I'm a big Android Wear user. I mean, what is Wear OS now? Wear OS. Oh boy.
Yeah, it's a mess right now. I mean, Android Wear is a mess. Is a mess. I mean, the process alone for just putting a custom watch face on, you have to download third-party app, enable the watch face that you want, go back to the Wear OS app, enable that watch face, go back to the third-party app, customize it, then put it back on the Wear OS app. Like, that's the steps.
Don't even get me started. I used to work at Pebble. I know what simple experience can be like. This is not a simple experience.
Sweet. I found my old Pebble. It was like my Pebble Steel. It was like harkening back to a simpler time.
Does it still work?
I haven't charged it.
Have you charged it?
It still works.
You should charge it, because you see the biggest problem with the old Pebbles is that there's this manufacturing defect that a lot of Pebbles, as they age, the display gets like the contacts come loose and it gets kind of separated from the main board, and then you get these vertical lines on the display. And it seems to get worse with age, and worse with vibration, and worse with shock. And, mine, I have a pre-production prototype of a Steel because, I used to work there. Yeah. And it still works, but I get the vertical lines randomly from time to time when I bump it around. And then if you bump it again, it undoes that because, it's kind of like an intermittent thing.
Yeah. When I use Android Wear, it's gotten to the point where I can only use it for pretty much notifications. And then
and that's exactly all I want, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and controlling audiobooks in my car. That's pretty much all.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what I'm happy with. Like, I wanted one of the things for me is it needs to tell the time always, all the time. I like the always on option.
Yep.
And I've been using Huawei watches for quite a while. I had the Watch Original, now I have the Watch 2, but I've put a custom leather band on it because I feel it looks too sporty otherwise, Although there's a Watch 2 Classic now, which I don't have. But anyway, the point is for me, it's telling the time all the time, always on. And then notifications, and fitness is a third. If it's there, if it has some sensors, extra sensors, nice. I don't need it. Payment, I never use on my watch. I think that Google Pay on the watch is a terrible implementation. The fact that you have to unlock the watch.
Oh, it's horrible.
It's like, are you kidding me? What were you thinking? Like, it's in Bluetooth proximity with my phone. It's connected to my phone. I should authenticate at that point. Like, I shouldn't have to put anything in. It should just work.
Everything about the experience is a garbled mess, and Google's got to rectify it, and I think that they're finally coming close to doing it.
Anyway, we're tangenting, which I love. Oh, yeah. By the way, this is a word me and Scott Stein made up on the podcast last week, which is taking the word tangent and turning it into a verb. So tangenting, tangented. This is good. The podcast is all about tangenting, but I do want to go back to the P20 because I don't really care so much about Android Wear or Wear OS. I just want to... I'm with you on a Pixel Watch. I'd be on board. Honestly, it already exists. I'll tell you what the Pixel Watch is. It exists, and it's got all the messes and issues that we just talked about. It's a Tag Heuer watch. I mean, if you want the best Android Wear watch and you have $1,500 to spend, this is your watch. I've seen it. I've used it. It is freaking awesome. If I had to contact a Tag Heuer to get a review in it, I would do so. If I could afford to spend $1,500 on a watch, which I might be able to, but I think is a little excessive for a smartwatch at least.
For what's going to be outdated in like 6
Exactly.
months.
For a smartwatch, it's excessive. I would buy one because it is absolutely the best Android Wear watch or Wear OS watch I have ever used. And I'm talking about the newer one, the one that doesn't come with this rubbery bracelet that you can't remove. Yeah. So the Gen 2 Tag Heuer is the best. But anyway, back to phones. Back to kind of I/O actually, and this whole Pixel 3. So we talked about Face ID, and I think Face ID needs to be faster than the next gen. But other than that, in terms of accuracy, I don't have any issues, and you don't either, right?
No, not at all. Actually, I'm
and
really
so what we need now is some Android manufacturer to do the same. So I thought Samsung might do it with S9, and then I thought Huawei might do it with P20s, particularly because Huawei teased. If you were at CES at the Honor event, they showed us a phone with a notch in the screen that is not the P20. That looks like it was like some sort of either render or prototype. It was briefly in the video, and it looked like a future phone from Honor or Huawei that would have all the sensors you need to do Face ID. And so I thought, surely the P20 is that phone, but nope. And then the Note 9 might be that phone, and then the Pixel 3 might need that phone, and then maybe the Galaxy S10 might be that phone. And I'm not talking about the Galaxy X because that's going to be the folding phone.
You know, Miriam, if you say it's going to rain, eventually one day, say it's going to rain every day, one day you are going to be right.
Statistically, yes.
So
one
day we're going to be right. And one day one of these phones are eventually
The reality is that it has to happen soon because Apple, it's not magic what they're doing. Like there's no weird, like this is Kinect shrunk down in size and some clever software applied to it. That's all it is. And they acquired the Kinect team for that. So, I mean, it's not like it's rocket science here, folks. Somebody needs to make it happen. Get working, engineers.
I'm going on record. I think we're going to see mainstream in-screen fingerprint readers on Android first before we see something that's close to
absolutely. And this goes back to the fancy phone that we want to talk about later. Ooh. But in the meantime, the P20 has a fingerprint reader in the front, which I think is a bit weird, considering it's such a modern phone in every other way. And then the notch. Some people hate it, some people love it. I'm a little ambivalent, but I have to admit that on the iPhone, the notch is poorly implemented. And I'm not talking about the perfect design of the rounded corners of the notch. If you read Daring Fireball, Gruberg always goes on about how perfect the curvatures of the angles of the corners of the notch are because it's Apple. And all that is true, even though it's mental masturbation, it's true. The thing is that we don't care because Apple, when you show a photo or a video in landscape, you should cut off that notch. It should just become invisible because you have an OLED display and the pixels are black. And why don't you do that? So here's what I think is very exciting about the P20, P20 Pro is that Huawei made a setting where you can turn off the notch. And you're going to say, oh, well, okay, you're wasting pixels. No, you don't understand. They're turning it black. So especially on the P20 Pro with OLED, it looks like it's not there.
Yeah.
But they're still displaying the signal and the time in there in white, just faintly. And then the video and the photos are cropped properly and everything looks phenomenal. They even, and actually the pre-production units I used last week did not have this, but I've seen screenshots of the latest version and it does have this. I told them about this. I suggested they do this. I don't know if they did it because of me or if it was in the pipeline already, but they rounded the corners when not displaying video and photos of the part of the notch, like the bottom edge of the notch, so that it matches the natural curved bottom edge of the screen. Really dope. Do you know what I'm saying?
No, it's a cool implementation. I think so people can understand. Essentially, since OLED technology essentially is just turning on the pixels that are being used, that's why the rest of it is just black and it's better for battery life. They just are turning off essentially that part of the display that's surrounding the notch, so you can't even see it.
They're basically doing a negative on that part of the display. So it's black it's white text on black instead of black text on white. So you don't see the notch, but you still have additional information there. And more importantly, it then turns the phone into a V30. You get kind of a rounded corner effect on what's left of the screen, right? Because the bottom part physically has rounded corners, but the top part only has rounded corners in the notch area. So I don't know if you noticed, but in software, they're rounding the corners of the edges when you turn off the notch. It's really cool.
It's a very cool implementation, and it's hard to not talk about the notch and without harkening back to Apple. You know, Apple claims they did it for a brand identity reasons. It's just so funny to see the Android manufacturers. And in a way, it's a smart thing because it is immediately recognizable as an iPhone 10 when you see that notch on like an iconic diagram, right? Yeah, at least it used to be.
Well, no, but it still is because nobody has made a phone with a notch where the bottom of the display goes right to the edge. Apple's the only one.
No,
think about this for a second.
Part of the bottom part, that's true. If you just see the top of the phone, though, there's a lot that look very similar.
But to me, this is really weird. If you think about it, you went to MWC, you saw this too, right? Like Zenfone 5 has a chin at the bottom. Noah N10 has a chin at the bottom. Pretty much the G7, the leaked G7 we saw, right? Chin at the bottom. They all have notches at the top. And now Huawei P20, chin at the bottom. And to make it even worse, they put a fingerprint reader in there. Why? Yes. This is completely defeating the purpose of a full screen display, people.
So the two funny things. First, just for your listeners, have some fun. Go to the Zenfone 5 product page on Asus website. Just see if it looks familiar to you. Just with the product. The product page itself is hysterical. And those G7 leaks, they were actually renders that we actually made at TechnoBuffalo, just based on sort of schematics that we'd heard. So I'm thinking that got scrapped, but no, you're totally right. There isn't anybody that's done the bottom part as well.
Because the manufacturers of displays are not making, they need room for the connectors and the electronics for the display somewhere, and they put it there. And Apple has somehow got Samsung to make them a custom OLED display. The other thing to point out is the P20 Pro is the only other notch display that I know of on the market today with OLED. other than the iPhone 10, because all the other ones, the P20 regular, Zenfone 5, Noah N10, and presumably that LG display on the G7 Proto that you guys rendered, it was all IPS.
Yes.
So IPS requires backlighting, requires a bunch of other stuff that, basically OLED is thinner of a package and less connectors. So it is easier to make a display that's full screen on OLED. And that's also why, if you look, the Essential phone, the Mix, Mi Mix 2, Mi Mix Original, Mi Mix 2, Mi Mix 2S, which we're going to talk about in a minute, they all have a tiny little chin at the bottom because connectors. Yeah. So there you go. So I don't know. I think this is to me this is the biggest as much as I love this camera stuff, that's camera madness, and I love the color, especially the twilight, and I love how the writing on the back of the phone is in landscape mode, kind of hinting at it being a camera. You know what I'm saying? Right? It's like encouraging you to hold it right when you do video, not that vertical video BS.
Yeah, the attention to detail is incredible. And I think for me, you see attention to detail, and this is an odd thing to say, in the SIM tray. You take out the SIM tray on an iPhone versus the SIM tray on a Galaxy S9.
Oh, I saw your story about that.
Yeah. I mean, so your
story about premiumness.
Yeah, you can see the attention to detail. So I'm curious what Huawei has done if they've taken their attention to detail down to that level. And if they have, then I give them a ton of credit for being one of the few that's sort of paying attention to the things that people don't usually see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll see. The bottom line is, from the back, I think the phone looks phenomenal. From the front, I'm conflicted because half of it looks modern, the top half. The bottom half looks like a phone from 2 years ago. And And their reason, I literally asked them that in the briefing. I'm like, what the F are you doing, Huawei? This is not a modern looking phone from the front half bottom. And they're like, well, we found that last year with the P10. Our users really like the fingerprint reader in the front. I'm like, do not listen to your users. This is not how you make good product. Talk to Apple. You do not listen to your users. You do your thing. Okay? What the F, Huawei?
Yeah, you got to tell the users what they want. And I should say that all this discussion about Huawei, and it's hard to talk about Huawei without just bringing it up quickly if I can tangentialize for a minute.
Go tangenting.
All the legal stuff going on with Huawei. These phones might look gorgeous. The cameras might be incredible, but you're probably not going to be able to easily purchase one in the U.S.
Well, gray market's the only way you're going to purchase one in the U.S. because even though the Mate 10 Pro is still available on Amazon and getting dropped by Best Buy, which is crazy, but it's still officially available on Amazon with a warranty in the U.S., the P20 will never make it to the U.S. You'll never get a warranty, so it'll always be a gray market product. And that is that. If you want it, just deal with it. Buy it from an importer. Remember that warranty is going to be an issue. Some importers are very good at honoring warranty. They'll handle it for you. So just pick wisely. If you have a recommendation, go for it. I'm not attached to anyone. I used to recommend Negri Electronics back in the day because I used to do good stuff. Remember Ryan and his team?
I was actually talking to Ryan today, still a close friend.
Yeah, I talk to him on Facebook all the time. But I mean, he kind of retired, and I don't know what became of his company. I didn't really follow suit. But there are some importers out there you can trust. So do your research, go out there, buy a phone.
So Miriam, I got a question for you. Were you at the Huawei event at CES so they were supposed to announce the AT&T partnership?
Yeah, it was very sad.
Oh, and then they did it?
No, I'm joking. I didn't cry, but I felt the CEO's pain.
Yeah. So just as a quick story for your audience. So supposed to be this big AT&T partnership with Huawei at CES. It was leaked. It was rumored. It was about to happen. And like at the 0 hour, AT&T obviously under governmental pressure backed out. And so Huawei had this press conference scheduled and people sitting there and nothing to talk about. And then it was Sasha Segan, who, God bless Sasha, that man will always ask the most poignant questions at the appropriate time.
I know, he's great for that.
And he won't back down until he gets an answer. It was like, hand raised in everybody's mouth. Jaws dropped and they saw his hand go up. And Huawei's like, yeah, we don't know. We had nothing to say.
I know, it was insane. I don't know what to make of this. I mean, I think our current regime is is a protectionist regime that will not, that is putting tariffs on all kinds of foreign things. This is not going to make our economy better. This is not going to make our technology advantage stand out and continue to stand out if we keep doing this. But yet, for whatever misplaced reason, maybe the intelligence community has some dirt on Huawei that we have no idea about. But the reality is, I don't think this is completely unwarranted. I feel that Huawei, at least on the handset side of things, I don't really believe that they have anything in there that's dangerous to, anyone in the world, that these phones are safe to use. And I think they're good products. They're some of the best products. They're the number 3 phone maker in the world, or number 2, whatever it is now. And it's disgusting to me that we can't get these officially in the US. And it's even worse when, it's one thing if the carriers, break their deals last second. I mean, it's very newsworthy and it's very disappointing because until Huawei can sell in the carriers, they will never be able to compete with Apple and Samsung. But at the same time, when you see Best Buy pulling out, you're like, holy F-balls, this is insane. That's my opinion.
And there's no explanation really, at least yet, to the consumer as to why this is being done. Is it a spyware concern? Is it somehow related to the some of the embargoes that's being happened and sort of the trade tariffs that are being put on? Like, what's the reason?
It's protectionism. It's misplaced. I believe it's misplaced, and it's just another way to keep. It's mostly to keep Huawei down on the networking side. I get that because 5G is coming, and they're like one of the leaders in that, and obviously Qualcomm wants that piece of the pie, and I get all that. But Qualcomm can still have their piece of the pie. They're not throwing out Nokia Siemens from the arena, and they're the other player in 5G networking equipment. So I don't get it. It's like, to me, you're basically throwing the baby with the bathwater by throwing these phones out, because it's like, maybe, I have no issues if they don't want a 5G Huawei equipment in the US. Fine. For the cell phone towers, fine. Mm-hmm. But the phones, are you kidding me? They're some of the best phones. You're missing out. Like every single one of you listening to this podcast is going to be missing out on not being able to buy the P20 and P20 Pro officially in the US. It is potentially the most innovative phone that we've seen in 2018. Well, it is definitely the most innovative phone we've seen in 2018. Potentially the most innovative phone we'll see all year in 2018.
Unless there is something nefarious going on the software side. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that there is. But I still don't buy it because Europe was privacy and security obsessed. Like, they're way worse than us Americans. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. But I would like to know. They would have caught it
by now.
I would like to know what the reason is. And if it is protectionism, like, I would like to know that. If there's something that's nefarious in there, obviously I'd like to know that as well.
We'll never know.
The silence on it is deafening.
And when the pendulum swings the other way and the current regime gets ousted, then Huawei has potentially a chance to rebuild the smartphone business in the US if they don't pull out before then. And what I mean by pull out is they're very close. I mean, with Amazon being the only left and they're selling unlocked phones. And there are some solutions here. There are some solutions. First of all, if I was Huawei, this is what I would do. I would stop selling Huawei, the brand, in the US completely. Done. I would use the Honor brand, which already exists.
Yep.
And I would put Qualcomm chips in these phones. I know it's hard because Kirin is their thing, blah, blah, blah. But I do believe they could do it. And I would sell these in the US. And then you could say, like, okay, look, we're not Huawei, we're Honor. We're made with Qualcomm. Mm-hmm. And here's the other thing I would do to really reassure people on the software side, because we all know EMUI is a piece of BS because it's the worst. Oh my God, I hate it. What if they sold all their phones with Android One?
Oh, okay. I'm on board.
Now all of a sudden you have Google's trust, right? You have Android One, pure Google implementation. You have Qualcomm's trust, the chipsets. And now you make beautiful, affordable phones for the US market and laptops, maybe put Intel chips in the laptops, with the Honor brand. And you're done. Like, it's a simple strategy. And yes, you're not going to get into the carriers until the current stupid regime gets out, but at least you'll sell stuff and you can at least build mind share within the media, within the early adopters, the tech savvy folk, the people who are going to be excited about a high quality unlocked Android One phone, and you're going to continue maintaining a baseline of market share. Just like OnePlus, just a baseline of market share. That's what I would do.
I would use that exactly what you said as a business model. I don't disagree with anything there at all.
I mean, seriously, these people should pay me for this crap.
It's startling what's going on with Huawei, but I would have felt like I didn't do the audience justice if I didn't at least bring it up. You know, the legal sort of stuff surrounding them or talking about their incredible
I appreciate. I mean, we talked about it at length in the book. It's been, I think in fact my little theory was, I didn't get quite into as much detail the last time I talked about my little theory, but I believe that I've more or less outlined this idea of mine in the podcast before. But look, I want to go back before. I mean, we want to talk about a bunch of other stuff here. We have talked about the P20 at length, but I do want to. We didn't talk about the camera enough. I hate to say it, but we need to. So a few things about the camera.
For days.
Well, we could, but here's the thing that is really important. A lot of my listeners, are camera phone enthusiasts because I'm a camera phone enthusiast, and so they want some more meat. There's been a lot of conflicting information about what's going on in terms of computational photography with the P20 and P20 Pro. And that's why we were teasing earlier about the stabilization issue. Notice that of all these cameras, of all these sensors, of all these lenses on these phones, 4 lenses and cameras and sensors on the Pro and 3 on the P20, we have not got any with OIS except the zoom. Right?
Yeah.
And so if you know anything about mobile photography, at this point, you're pulling your hair out going, are you kidding me? They're doing what they did with the P9, no OIS? Well, here's the kicker.
Oh, yeah.
And I've tested this, and it's insane. Somehow Huawei has created something that they marketing speak call AIS for AI stabilization, of course, because AI is the big buzzword. And they've created a super stable electronic system that is unfortunately not good enough for zoomed lenses because the 3 times zoom require some mechanical motion compensation, which is why they put OIS on the zoom lens. But combined with the OIS on the zoom lens, it creates incredibly stable photos. When I tested the P20, P20 Pro, and mostly I spent time with the P20 Pro, to be honest, so, assume that I'm talking about the P20 Pro here. You would point at an object with the viewfinder, and as soon as you stop moving, like just basically it was just hand motion and no like panning motion, the image would just pop on this viewfinder and get like completely insanely steady. Like to the point where I was like, from there, if I moved even a little more than I normally would with OIS, it would still stay stable. And frankly, I have no idea how they're doing this because a lot of people say, well, they're using the 40 megapixel sensor and cropping. No, because they're also doing it with the P20 on the 12 megapixel sensor. So I'm not sure what voodoo magic they're using here, but damn, it's good. And one of the modes they have is a long exposure mode that basically lets you do tripodless, like without a tripod, long exposures at night, handheld, like read my lips, handheld for 4 seconds to 8 seconds. And I've seen it, I've tried it.
It's insane.
It is absolutely rock solid blurless results. So that's what's got me the most excited. And the low light performance on that phone, because it uses all 3 lenses. Every photo you take, whether you do a bokeh or a zoom or a black and white or a, whatever mode you're using or even video, all of these enhancements exist. All 3 sensors and lenses and camera systems are active at the same time. They all feed data to that Kirin 970 and like some serious crazy ISP is happening, image signal processing. And the results are sublime. I mean, I think this phone might finally dethrone the Pixel 2. This is it. We might be there. I'm not sure until I get a review in it, so stay tuned.
Yeah, at least on paper, it looks like it should. And that is lofty praise. Yeah, lofty praise. I used it,
and some of those things, the AIS totally had me roll my eyes, and I was like, there's no way on earth you made image stabilization is better than optical. No way. And then I used it, and I was like, oh my God, they did it.
And to even have a discussion that the phone is better, a camera is better than the Pixel 2 XL is staggering in its own right.
Correct. So here's a few things you need to know. I'm just going to finish up on the camera real quick. This is a kind of more technical details, and this is specific to the P20 Pro. Or actually, it's also on the P20, but only on the front camera. So the front camera, 24 megapixels seems overkill, and it is. Nobody will ever shoot a full 24 megapixels at the front. But here's what they're doing. They're doing pixel binning. They're combining 4 pixels into one. So they're effectively lowering the resolution down to something like 5 or 6 megapixels. For the front camera, and by binning, they're able to do some really clever noise reduction in low light. So you get much better low light performance in that front-facing camera than you would using a standard sensor with tiny 0.9 micron pixels like that. And this is not new. Nokia did it with the 808 PureView and then with the Lumia 1020, which are both 41 megapixel phones. And the 40 megapixel sensor on the P20 Pro does the same. It's a 1 micron, 1 over 1.7 inch, 40 megapixel sensor. And in most modes, it does not, you can set it to output 40 megapixels if you want, but you're going to lose a lot of the computational photography benefits because by default, it outputs 10 megapixels. Using binning, taking 4 pixels and turning them into 1, you end up with effective pixel size of 2 micron. Which is why it's going to slay in low light.
I haven't seen it yet in person, so I haven't tested it, but I cannot wait to test the camera on this thing.
I mean, I can't. It's just, I am so excited I'm getting one soon. You have no idea. Like, I'm going to clear my week off. Like, completely clear my desk or anything that's going on. In fact, I'm doing my taxes right now specifically for that, so I don't have to do it later.
Can I make a request? Can I make a request when you get it in for more pictures of your Boxster?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It needs a wash so bad right now.
I love that car. I love that car.
Yeah. I mean, the weather's finally turning, so it's been kind of more or less in storage most of the winter. I mean, in my garage and with on the trickle charger. So I just finally I'm back in Portland right now at my secondary residence where my cars kind of live. And I've been driving it around. So it's getting an oil change and it's going down to California for the rest of the summer. But anyway, yeah, I'll take more pictures of everything, I think, with that phone. It's going to be super exciting, right?
I am pumped for it. But that's not, I mean, can I segue? That's not the only exciting phones that were announced?
Segue, please. Well, what else are you excited about? Do tell, John.
So, like, what about the Porsche design?
Oh, the Porsche design. Yeah, well, okay, so very quickly, there is a Porsche design version of the P20, and yeah, this is confusing. It's called the Mate RS.
So
thanks, Huawei, for being consistent.
Okay,
but
what's crazy though, the price of this thing. If you thought $1,000 for a phone was crazy,
2,000.
2,200, I believe, for the 512 gigabytes of storage.
I think the cheapest I've seen is the 256 version is I think 1,000 something euros, so just a little over 1,000. So you translate that, it's like 1,500 US or something like that. And then you've got the 512 gig, which, as you said, is like 2,200. And what's different? Well, it's available in black and kind of this beautiful Ferrari red, which is interesting because Porsche doesn't usually, the red is not near a Porsche color as much as white would be, but Porsche has Guards Red, which is a standard color in their car palette. And I don't know if this is a Guards Red, but if it is, it's a really nice red. So it's pretty much the same, but it bumps the OLED to Quad HD, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the fingerprint reader is under the screen in the front. There you go. You're welcome. And then there's one in the back as well, because, those of us who like to unlock by putting our index fingers in our pockets. Woohoo. And what else? Am I missing anything?
So obviously you said the input fingerprint reader. It's not the Synaptics one that we saw Vivo use either, which is kind of interesting. They switched the orientation of the cameras as well to be kind of vertical in the middle.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's not as sexy looking in my opinion, but it is definitely the higher end version. Hey, one thing, John, do you know this? Yeah. Because I don't know this because I never checked when I had the phones in front of me. Do they have micro SD support?
Ooh. I gotta
research that because the Mate 10 does it, but the Mate 10 Pro doesn't. And so I'm wondering, of those three phones, P20, P20 Pro, Mate RS, which one has, if any, has micro SD expansion? Because that's a big deal for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'll look it up. I'm going to probably actually go with no on that because it's the first phone you can get with 512 gigabytes of storage. So I imagine that.
Well, definitely the Porsche Design probably doesn't. Yeah. But I'm thinking maybe the P20 and P20 Pro do. It'd be interesting to see. They do have 128 gigs of storage, which is pretty big. And there's also a P20 Lite, which I have no information about because they didn't show it to me at a briefing. Yeah. And it was announced in Paris yesterday as well.
No expandable storage, by the way. Confirmed.
Okay, well, there you go. It's confirmed. And no headphone jack. Is there a headphone jack on the Porsche Design? Probably not.
No, I doubt it.
No, that's too bad. It comes as an adapter. Deal with it. All right. There's a few more phones we want to talk about real quick because we have like 15 minutes. So let's cram them in there. What do you want to start with, John?
I mean, let me ask you because this is. I mean, I'm sure your audience probably knows, but like, what's your daily phone? I just kind of want to know.
I use a Pixel 2 XL. You know, I'm always a Pixel Nexus user to death, basically. Yeah, I just don't have time to switch my phones to like my daily drivers to be other phones because it requires so much. Like, no, I don't customize my phones, but I do have a lot of apps. So,
is yours? Do you have the panda color?
No, I have the whatever review unit they gave me, which was a black one. They never sent me a panda, regrettably. But hey, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, the black was what they always give to everybody, no matter what.
I got both the black Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL, and so I love it. It's good. Camera is great. And I hate the fact that it has no headphone jack. The display is wonky, but I got new to it. It's not too terrible, especially after the changes they made. I mean, no, it's fine. And I've got Galaxy S9 Plus that I've been playing with. I haven't posted too many photos yet, but stay tuned for that. I'm gonna. I've got some opinions I'm going to share on maybe on the next podcast. It's good. The camera is good. It's just, not a Pixel 2. Okay. That's the bottom line.
I am enjoying, I'm using a 9 Plus that I went and picked up. I'm loving, and I'm using it more than I thought I would, the 960 frames per second. The slow motion's awesome. It's only 0.2 seconds.
And by the way, the Huawei P20 family has it too. 960 frame per second slow motion at 720p. Woohoo!
Which is a really big deal. It's absolutely incredible. I love on the Samsung at least that it's motion activated. So like when my son starts jumping or doing something, it automatically kicks in. You don't have to time it perfectly, which is next to impossible for 0.2 seconds. So I love.
That is really nice.
I love that, but I still find myself wanting to go back to the iPhone 10, and I always shied away from iPhones for the past years. But it finally has a worthwhile screen on it, and finally caught up with wireless charging and sort of those requirements to make a phone useful. So I'm switching phones back and forth between the Android du jour and an iOS more often than I have in any years past.
Yeah, I mean, those are the phones in my pocket right now. I'll just tell you the four are the Pixel 2 XL, iPhone, I always have four, so the iPhone 10, the V30s Plus Think Q, and the Galaxy S9 Plus. And then very soon I'll probably replace the V30 with the Mate 20 Pro. Sorry, the P20 Pro. So let's talk about the other phone news. There's a bunch of phone news.
Yeah. If
you don't mind. It's not super exciting, but so we touched on this a little bit. The Mi Mix 2S was announced yesterday.
Yep.
It is an evolution of the Mi Mix 2 from Xiaomi. Again, this is not a phone you'll get in the US. But if you get in India, which I think it'll be selling, you'll be able to get it with Google Play services, which is good because then my Mix 2 review unit is does Google Play services, which is great because you can use it in the Western world properly. Then the improvements, the changes are, I didn't look through the specs, but the biggest change is that it's got dual rear camera now, right?
Yeah, and the biggest aesthetic change is there's no notch here. So you're getting that thin display with no notch.
It's basically the same as the previous in terms of like, it's go right up to the top and then there's a small little chin at the bottom that has the camera in it. So it encourages you to flip the camera, like to flip the phone around so you don't have that, under chin thing going on when you take selfies. which the Mi Mix 2 and Mi Mix Original do as well. So, it's just, I think they bumped the processor Snapdragon 845, I believe. So it's improved from the 835, and it's got dual camera, which I haven't looked at the details, so don't ask me the specs. I'll post a link to a story on TechnoBuffalo about it. Woohoo! There you go.
So I can tell you, it's two different versions. Either 8 gigabyte version or 6 gigabyte version, varying between 128 on the ROM or 256. So there's.
Am I right about the 845? It's 845, right?
I honestly cannot confirm. I gotta imagine it is the 845, but here I'll tell you real fast. So it's running the MIUI 9 on top of Android 8.1, which I give them credit for 8.1 on here.
That's nice, yeah.
Qi wireless charging. The band support is a big one here too. It supports kind of absolutely everything. They added Qi. They added Qi. That's a big thing that wasn't the original too. But what's the processor? So Snapdragon 845.
Yeah,
confirmed Snapdragon 845, and it's got the Sony IMX363 sensor in it, which is an awesome sensor.
So is the second camera a wide angle or a zoom?
So it's got a single dual shot camera, and then it's got two 12 megapixel cameras on the back. I'm looking at it. I think it's got to be a zoom. It's got to be a zoom camera.
It's got to be a zoom. Camera. Yeah, I think that's the most popular option. Okay, so there you go. There's a Mi Mix 2S, and we'll post a link about it. I want to touch briefly on some OnePlus 6 leaks. We've seen Evan Blass, EV Leaks, has posted a photo of the back of the phone. Did you see that?
Yeah, I love the way he teased it too. He's like, "Hey, you heard of this little company called OnePlus?"
I'm bringing it up because it seems to me like I can't figure out what material that is. That wood? Is that brushed metal? What is that?
I think it's their. So in the past years, they've had these snap-on cases that have gone on the back, and they've had wood cases. I think it's just one of those. I don't think he's actually showing the material underneath. That's what I got out of it, because it looks identical to the cases with the other OnePlus devices.
Okay, that's what I thought. It's a black and white photo, it looks like, so it's kind of hard to tell. But it's got a lot of texture on the back, which is kind of interesting. But I mean, look, the OnePlus 6 is I have a feeling it's imminent. There's more and more activity around it. Kind of like what happened with the Galaxy S9 and other phones with leaks, or the P20 for that matter. So I think you should keep your ear to the ground. I think the OnePlus 6 is going to be a delightful phone. I think it's going to have a notch. It's going to be super modern looking because of it, for better or worse. Hopefully they can do what Huawei is doing and like hide the notch in this very clever way. And then while we're on the subject of Google-y things, I want to talk about, I think is it Asus or Acer that launched a Chrome OS tablet yesterday, or the day before, just before.
Asus, I believe.
You're right, it's Asus. So Asus just kind of out of nowhere just said, "Hey, here's a tablet. It's not an Android tablet, it's Chrome OS."
It's Acer, excuse me, I apologize. It is Acer.
Oh, see, I knew it was one of the...
It's the Chromebook Tab 10.
Taiwanese company. So it's an Acer tablet. Sorry, Asus, and sorry, Acer. Acer, credit where credit is due. I don't know the specs. I didn't even look. But I do have I do have a link to put down in the show notes for you guys. We knew we were going to talk mostly about the P20, so I just wanted to kind of bring it out there. If you haven't seen the news, go check out the show notes. There is a Chrome OS tablet out there now. It's a pure tablet. It doesn't have a keyboard or anything. It's kind of interesting. What's your quick take on that?
Super interesting. So I can give the specs just real quick.
Yeah, do you have the specs real quick?
Yeah, I got it handy. So it's a 9.7 inch QXGA LED panel. It's 248 by 1536. It's the OP1 is a processor.
That's rock chip, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting.
30 gigs of storage, 4 gigs of RAM. It's got cameras, rest of the stuff you'd expect. And it does have pen support. I've actually been using a Chromebook at home for most of my computer needs.
I have my main. Well, I have two main computers. I have a Mac, and I have my Pixel, Chromebook Pixel.
That's what I've been using too.
What is it? The new one, whatever the latest one, the one that turns into a
Pixel
tablet.
Book. The Pixel Book.
Pixel Book. Thank you. I was completely blanking on the name there for a second.
Yeah. So I've been pretty impressed with Chrome OS, and now you're taking it to a tablet form that can also support Google Play. You pair that with a keyboard case or some sort of Bluetooth keyboard, and you've got a really compelling package, especially at a presumably way lower cost than Apple's just introduced, low cost 6th gen iPad. If you haven't tried Chrome OS, it's at least now more than just a browser. Local storage, being able to have a file explorer, you can do almost anything with it. I've been very impressed with what the power of it and what it can do.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued because this wouldn't be a product I would seek out because I really want a keyboard. But I do have to admit, I sometimes flip my Pixelbook over into a tablet mode to watch videos and stuff. And I really like that option. So I'm intrigued to see what it would be like to live life with a Chrome tablet. As long as I could pair a Bluetooth keyboard from time to time, it'd be all right. Interesting. And you segued so beautifully into this. Apple announced something yesterday, and it wasn't that exciting, but it was significant because it is a new iPad. It's a new 9.7-inch iPad that is affordable. $299 educational price, $349 regular price. And it's a big bump over the previous cheap iPad, if you want to call iPads cheap, because it has the A10 processor, correct?
Yes, it's got the A10, same processor that was in the 7 and the 7
And
Plus.
it supports the Apple Pencil, and Logitech has a new little pencil clone that costs $49.
And
so we're
if I can chime in on that too, it's only available for schools. They can only ones that can buy that crayon that Logitech made. The consumers
the $49 one? Okay. Well, I'm sure that won't last. Don't worry. But the point is, Apple event yesterday in Chicago at some fancy school where they launched another very boring iPad. But, iPads aren't boring, but they're very liked and very, they're probably the best tablets out there. So I'm not being cranky on the iPad. I'm just saying it's not something I use, but I know millions of people use them and love them. So having a more affordable option that performs well is a good thing. So there you go. That's the Apple event in a nutshell.
I loved what Apple did. So Apple doesn't want to be known for playing in the low end of the market, right? Apple's known as a premium manufacturer.
Of course.
So what they did was they did it under the guise of education. Hey, for schools, we're having a lower cost iPad. We're playing in the lower markets for schools. But hey, also it's available for consumers, if you want to buy it. But it's just for schools. But consumers, if you want to buy a lower cost iPad, hey, we've got it available. But it's just for schools. They did like sort of a Steve Jobs sort of distortion with the low cost iPad. It was just a brilliant marketing play, and I was very impressed with how Apple executed it.
I mean, that's Apple's brilliant in marketing. Like you can't knock them for marketing. So, yeah, I think again, iPad. I don't have much use for it, but I know lots of people do.
Yeah,
I do think it's the best tablet on the market. I always recommend. People ask me, should I buy a tablet? I'm like, whatever you do not buy an Android tablet. Seriously, don't. They're terrible. They're horrible. Maybe a Kindle Fire if you're just watching, videos and reading books. But even then, I'm not convinced. I'm not sold on Kindle Fire. So I say,
nor am I.
Save your money and buy an iPad because look, if you're creative and you want to do some cool stuff, the best music apps exist on the iPad. Like I'm a musician. I like to tinker. If you want to have like all the synths and the different, mixing and music creation apps, there's nothing that touches the iPad there. And yes, you can do it on your iPhone 10, but your iPhone 10 is too small of a screen to really make that, worthwhile. So what are you going to do? Get an Android tablet for that? Please. Whatever.
They barely exist nowadays anyway, except for really Samsung's Tab S3.
Which is why I think this is kind of interesting that Acer made this Chromebook tablet because there's something to be said there.
Very much agree.
Tablet. That's kind of a weird Chromebook tablet. Book tablet. Ugh. The world we live in, John. I do not understand. More news. I think that's it. We've covered everything. So now we can rant and rave about whatever else we want for a few more minutes. You said, let's talk about our sponsor, Audible. You said you like to listen to audiobooks in your car earlier. Tell me you're using Audible, which is our sponsor.
So I pretty much only use my car stereo for audiobooks, and I only use Audible. I'm listening right now to John Grisham's The Rooster Bar is the book that I am currently listening to. That's not like something I'm saying just for the sponsor. I like legit use Audible on a daily basis. They are the best when it comes to audiobooks, and usually the cheapest.
Yeah, and I have to agree. I mean, this is not simply because Audible is sponsoring this podcast, but I really do believe that Audible has the best selection and is really the best platform for audiobooks. And so, of course, they are a sponsor. And, please support the podcast by going to visit the promo link I'm going to give you in a second. Audible is the number one, the most prolific audiobook platform out there, and you should check them out. They're affordable. They have lots of selection. I'm in the middle of I just finished the Star Wars The Last Jedi 11-hour plus epic audiobook. But I'm about to go into the William Gibson realm and revisit some of the early books that I really love. So and you just told us what you're listening to. So if you want to support the podcast, go to audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. Click on that link and it'll support the podcast and join Audible. You can try it for free for the month or whatever. It's totally interesting. If you don't have time to read books and you want to listen to them instead, for me, it was like I stopped reading because I didn't have time to read the books physically. And being able to listen to them on road trips, on planes, whatever, really made a difference in my life, because I'm now feeling like I'm doing books again, but it's fitting into my life. And and for you, that sounds what it's like, because you're commuting in your car or something, right?
Yeah, I just don't have 2 kids at home. I just unfortunately don't have time to read anymore, but I loved reading and I loved hearing new stories. So legitimately, Audible's been the only way that I have a chance to keep up with my authors and sort of stories that I want to keep reading.
There you go. So, John, we should wrap it up. So, do you want to pimp yourself? Tell people where they can find you on the social medias and the internets? I mean, obviously, TechnoBuffalo, but do tell.
Oh, on TechnoBuffalo, or YouTube is TechnoBuffalo. The URL is technobuffalo.com. Check us out. I mean, it was just an honor to be on here, Miriam, to talk with you about tech. And I think you're one of the more respected voices in the industry. And it's an absolute pleasure to be on here with you. Thank you for having me.
So are you. I mean, TechnoBuffalo has been around for a long time and has done some really solid work. Absolutely.
We got old.
You should read it too. Did you tell people where they can find you on Twitter and on Instagram and all that?
Yeah, for Instagram, I'm Jon Rettinger. At Twitter, I'm the unfortunately named @John4Lakers, JON. But you can always find me at TechnoBuffalo as well.
Fantastic. And you folks all know where to find me. I'm at Tankgrl. That's TNKGRL. It's like the comic book character without the vowels. That's my handle almost everywhere, but I could not get it on YouTube. So it's on Instagram, on Twitter. YouTube, just go to youtube.com/MiriamJoire. And the reason I bring that up is you should subscribe, because I publish videos there that are just, compliments to this podcast, like unboxings and quick reviews and, hands-ons and things that show you, like, there's a hands-on the P20 and P20 Pro. So you can see the phones while we talk about them. You can maybe watch them while you listen to the podcast. You don't have to watch with audio. Subscribe to that channel, like the videos, and of course, subscribe to the podcast. Please tell your friends about the podcast. mobiletechpodcast.com. That's mobiletechpodcast.com. Just visit there. You'll find the RSS feed. If you search for Mobile Tech Podcast on Pocket Casts or iTunes, you'll find it as well. Please subscribe, tell more people. We're trying to grow this into something fun. So I need your support. And John, thanks for being on. It's really, really awesome. I finally got you on. I'm so glad. My pleasure. Thank you for having me. All right. That's the wrap, folks. Stay tuned for our show next week, and cheers. Bye-bye.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with TechnoBuffalo, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.